Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you're all having a good day. I am down here at the very bottom of a pit that I've dug so that I can AFK here at the slime farm, or at least have a place to stand while we contemplate what we're going to do next, because the slime farm has undergone a few changes. I have mostly just lit up the caves in the surrounding area, and as you can see, the slimes are actually spawning inside this farm now in greater numbers. You might still only see one or two at a time, but they are spawning much more frequently down here. And I've had some pretty interesting comments about the status of the zombie pigmen here, namely that pigmen spawned from portals should not affect the hostile mob cap in the world, which is a very interesting fact and one that I'm sure I will be able to use to our advantage later on. But as you can see, every so often we're getting a slime spawning here in the farm. It's popping on through the portal, and that should kill it in the nether on the opposite side. So we're actually getting a lot higher rates from this than we were before, purely from the fact that I've gone around and painstakingly lit up a bunch of the caves yesterday. So a ton of the work has been done to make this farm more effective. One of the things that we still need to take care of is the fact that there are a few other slime chunks in this area, and with the slimes able to openly spawn in those areas because there aren't too many other hostile mobs spawning, it does mean that we probably need to spawn-proof those chunks against slime spawning. Despite the fact they will spawn in whatever light level you give them, slimes will not spawn in areas that are slabbed off or carpeted in the same way that other hostile mobs simply don't find a valid spawning space. Nothing to do with light, everything to do with the surface they are spawning on and the fact that they still need to spawn in on a solid block. So I might do a little bit more of that in the caves around here, because this beacon mine is not the only place that we have lit up where I'm seeing slimes spawning more frequently. And if we zoom over here very quickly while I've got the camera account on me, the other thing that we cannot really do a whole lot about unless we swim around this whole place is lighting up the flooded areas in this dripstone cave, because those are the places where the drowned will still spawn if there is a low enough light level. And thankfully, there are a few magma blocks around here giving off a low light level, which is preventing some spawning in the area. Drowned spawn quite infrequently down here, and there's also stuff like glow lichen, torches from nearby caves, and other bits and pieces keeping the drowned spawns from getting off the charts and ruining the rates of our mob farm over here with the slimes. But it is potentially an issue that we will get drowned spawning in this area as well. And that's something we'll probably turn to our advantage in future if we want to make a naturally spawning drowned farm, because considering we've already spawn-proofed a large amount of the area around this dripstone cave biome, which is one of the biomes in which drowned will spawn in open water, it might be worth creating a drowned farm here at some point in future as well. So with all that said, I'm going to return to my body here. We're going to log the camera account out. I'm going to hop on through to the nether and we'll see what dividends our slime farm has paid. And yes, I do still need to bring a few more ladders down here with me. Well, I'm certainly hearing a lot of zombie piglins as I get down here, and it might even be worth swapping out the campfires around here. Oh, a little bit of XP coming on through. It might be worth swapping out the campfire layer here for maybe powdered snow, because I can pretty much be guaranteed that that would kill the zombie piglins as well, whereas they're immune to fire damage and wouldn't take too much damage in that respect. Never mind, we can just clear out the rest of the zombie piglins from inside the farm here. We'll get a little bit more XP and gold coming through to the loot chest in the process of that, and yeah, I'll grab the rest of the XP from here. Nice to clear out the farm, and let's see. Oh, okay, we actually have we have a full double chest of drops in here, most of which, thankfully, is slime. Now, we're going to come up with some sort of system, like I said, to get rid of all of the piglin drops. We'll throw all the gold swords out here for now. Can probably just throw them into a fire or something and have them disappear. There is even, incredibly, one raw chicken in here, which I presume is from a zombie chicken jockey, which I didn't know could spawn from nether portals. So there's something I learned today. But of course, what is left in here is really what we're here for. We've got tons and tons of slime balls building up in here, and one row of those is going to be 9 stacks of slime balls, which equals 1 stack of slime blocks. So having emerged from the nether, we can take a look, and we have 5.5 stacks of slime blocks, which is pretty darn good if you ask me. That is one successful slime farm. And so we can take a look at what slime blocks can do when you're able to acquire them in large quantities. So first of all, slime blocks are kind of cool to look at. To begin with, they actually have a quite interesting texture. There's obviously a certain amount of transparency to them visually. You can sort of see through them. They're sort of translucent, I guess, and they do have this more solid looking but still see-through center. So they've already got a bit of an interesting dynamic to them. The further away you get, actually, the more prominent that center part of it becomes. It's a cube within a cube, and I think they look quite good as a result. In larger quantities, you can imagine them pooling at the bottom of a cave like this and having this kind of squishy, slimy vibe to the whole thing, as though this had been part of like a chemical spill or something like that. You could even imagine them as part of this ooze of green fog coming up from the bottom of a cave, although honestly the fact that the texture are tiles, so obviously with that central section to them, maybe not the best use of them. But as far as aesthetics go, they are kind of cool, and they won't block light in any way. Despite the fact they are a full solid block, they take up the entirety of this, and they even conduct redstone power, which is something we'll get onto a little bit later. You can still hide light sources behind them, and if we put a slime block in front of that, it doesn't lessen the amount of light getting to this area. The block light from that glowstone is still reaching us here and providing 11 block light on the block that I stand on. So if you were inclined to do so, and you had an area like this that you were completely filling up with slime blocks, you could hide light sources underneath them, like the glowstone down there, and still leave the area with a nice ambient light, while effectively concealing where the light is coming from. You might not want to use them for decoration in areas that you plan to travel quite frequently, because slime blocks do slow you down. They make your footsteps kind of sticky in the same way that honey blocks do, and as a result, you'll find yourself walking a lot slower on top of slime blocks. I think that's even slower than you move on soul sand. Although there are some instances in which that might be an advantage. If you need to move slower for whatever reason, then you could use slime blocks to achieve that effect. And the effect will even persist through blocks like carpet, where the non-solid nature of the block actually allows the slime block to still be the surface you're walking on, and it's just the top surface here that's decorated by carpet. You also still get the particles if you're sprinting. The particles will still show through as slime blocks, and the sound effects as well will indicate the fact that you're currently walking on slime blocks. As we've already demonstrated, one of the principal traits of slime blocks is that when you fall, they will bounce you back up into the air to a limited amount of height, and there's a couple of ways that you can control that as well. But first of all, it's worth noting that they won't bounce you even halfway up the distance that you fell. There are hard limits to this as well. If you fell from 255 blocks up in the air onto a slime block, you would only bounce about 50 blocks back in the air, and I believe the maximum jump height from a slime block is capped at about 57 blocks, 57 and a bit. So it's actually not possible to bounce super high with a slime block, although you can try and push that to its limit if you want to. Regardless of the height you fall from, you also shouldn't take any damage falling onto slime blocks, as long as you let them bounce you in the normal way. One crucial thing to remember is not to crouch while falling onto slime blocks, because then the bounce won't take effect at all, and you'll end up falling directly onto them, taking the full force of the damage as you would if you'd fallen onto any other solid block. So crouching as you fall prevents you from bouncing, but it also applies the normal amount of fall damage. Now, holding jump as you fall, and I'm going to take my elytra off for this demonstration just so I don't activate them mid-fall. If I hold jump, I will actually land on the slime blocks without bouncing and with no fall damage, or effectively it limits the height of your bounce to the normal jump height. You basically start jumping as soon as you hit the slime block, and at that point no more bounce height applies. And if you're designing an obstacle course or a parkour course, you can pretty easily use slime blocks to have the players achieve massive jump heights if they jump from area to area that will mean they can clear obstacles that they couldn't do otherwise. But it's worth noting that accuracy is important here, and there were a couple of moments when I was setting this up that I jumped down onto the slime block and took fall damage and didn't actually bounce at all. That is because the player isn't snapped to the grid when you fall on a block, and it is entirely possible to fall between two separate blocks. And if you are a fraction of a percentage of a block over, if you are just a tiny pixel's worth of space over onto a neighboring block, and that block is not a slime block, you will not bounce. If you look at my X, Y, and Z coordinates here, you'll notice the X is 333, and I'm looking down at this block of deep slate here. The slime block is on 332, and so even if I'm standing on the slime block, if I've fallen directly on the edge of the slime block like so, and I'm technically over into the next block, I can land on this space without taking any of the bounce from the slime block, and instead I end up taking fall damage. So if you're dropping from a great height, or if there is an area that you absolutely want your players to land on, you don't want there to be any risk of them falling halfway onto the next block over and not bouncing, you probably want to enlarge your slime block pads to a 2x2 or a 3x3 to give them a slightly wider target. It's even possible, if you are quick on the draw, to place a slime block or two as you land, and use them sort of like the MLG water bucket catch, being able to drop a slime block right on the ground before you hit the ground. Naturally, that has the effect of blocking all fall damage and even propelling you back upwards if you want to get up to a certain height again. In addition to you not taking fall damage, this can also be kind of a neat way to cross spaces like this where there's a ravine and you need to get to the other side. But a player is not the only thing that will bounce on slime blocks. Slime blocks will also bounce items, and so, to a certain extent, will beds. If I climb up onto a temporary pillar like this, we can throw this red wool, and you'll notice it bounces a couple of times before coming to rest on the edge of the bed there. The same thing will happen with slime blocks, but they have a great deal more bounce, and you'll notice it bounces once and then clears the other slime block completely, falling off the side there. Even for players, beds do have a similar bouncy property, although they won't block fall damage completely the way slime blocks will, and I'm pretty sure the bounce height from them is much more limited as well. Beds will reduce fall damage, they won't eliminate it entirely in the way slime blocks do. But items will bounce on top of slime blocks, and we can use this to our advantage, especially when you pair them with pistons. Setting up a slime block attached to a sticky piston is really where we can see these mechanics come to life. For a start, if I throw an item entity onto here, like so, for this block of sand, for example, and if I activate this sticky piston with the slime block attached to its front face, you'll notice the item entity gets thrown up into the air and has the same kind of bounce mechanics that a player does, although it comes to a stop a lot faster. And even though sand and gravel are affected by forces like gravity and are falling blocks, it doesn't end up doing that when the sand is just a regular block, although it can potentially activate while the sand is falling onto it, which might be a little bit difficult to do manually. Let's see if I can time this right. So if we place a sand block up there, and yeah, there we go. Managed to do that first try, although the slime block has come disconnected from the sticky piston for reasons I'll explain in a minute, but we did manage to bounce that sand block up as it was falling, so pretty cool. The difference there is that a falling sand block is more or less an entity in its own right, kind of like the item entities or like a player or an armor stand or something like that. Speaking of which, armor stands can be bounced up and down in the same way because they're more or less simulating a mob or a player, and for that matter, players can be bounced up and down on one of these things, as we've seen in the bounce pad I set up in the dripstone cave a while ago. And here's where things can get a little bit wackier, because we're also able to fire arrows at a slime block and hurl those into the air as well, although you want to be a little bit careful when they come back down if all you're doing is propelling them vertically. But slime blocks don't just have an effect on something's vertical momentum, they actually have an effect on the horizontal momentum as well. And to demonstrate, we can set up a slime block attached to a piston here at the start of an ice road, which we'll probably have to make sure that nothing connects to the slime block, because otherwise the slime block will try and push it. But let's set up a road of packed ice along here, and if it gets to about there, then that is about, what is that, 24 blocks long, something like that. Let's see how far an item can travel along this road of packed ice. We'll use a block of obsidian pushed up against that slime block as our test subject. We'll have to activate it with a block with a button on it, like so. It is going to start dragging around this one block of packed ice, but let's see how far that goes. Pretty much all the way to the end, actually, and it drops neatly off the end of that. So about 24 blocks worth of travel can be achieved with one slime block pushing an item entity that's right up against the slime block's face. But I want to try throwing the block of obsidian onto the very edge of the block here to see if it makes a difference if it's slightly off to one side of it, and it doesn't look like it does. It's going to travel the same way, and yeah, I did leave a little bit more packed ice on the edge here, but it does look like it came to a stop right there. But here comes the fun part, because by applying a little bit of redstone engineering and some timing, we can turn this into a machine that can use both vertical and horizontal flinging properties of slime blocks. So we're going to throw a little bit of redstone together here. We're going to put a sticky piston down here with a slime block attached to it. We'll need something down here to activate the piston, so we'll have some redstone dust on top of this block here, and adjacent to the slime block, we want to make sure the slime block isn't going to attach to something right here, because it's going to be able to move that block once it extends. And in this case, we're going to use obsidian because obsidian can be neither pushed nor pulled with pistons, and that means that as far as slime blocks are concerned, it's not going to be movable. From there, we're going to come along 2 blocks and up 1. We're going to remove that block there. That was just a placeholder, but we can add some redstone stuff on top of this. We're going to put some dust right there. We're going to have a repeater facing into that block and some dust on top of it. And then adjacent to that, we can place our next slime block and our next sticky piston. The sticky piston will go next to that redstone dust. The slime block will go there. And now if we place a button on the side of this, we can press the button and both of these slime blocks will activate in a very short succession. This one will fling stuff before this one does, thanks to the 1 tick of delay provided by the repeater. If you're on Bedrock Edition, you can set this to 2 ticks. I have tested it. It will work a little bit more accurately. But the main purpose of this contraption, as you might have guessed, is to be a TNT cannon, because if we place a TNT block on top of there, the power to this block is going to light it, and then the slime blocks are going to do their thing. So if I hit this button right there, there we go. The TNT is lit. It's flung out into the lake where hopefully it will harmlessly explode, unless there are any fish around, in which case we just invented dynamite fishing in Minecraft. But we could do the same thing with an armor stand here as well. The armor stand could get flung out into the lake, although players, mobs, and other entities might end up falling a little short. Like if I hop up onto this slime block, I attach a button to the end here and I press that, I'm going to get flung out into the lake, but as you can see, not nearly as far as the TNT went. Gravity and inertia and all of that kind of stuff reacts a little bit differently to mobs than it does to other items. But say we attach a bunch of arrows to this and then we fling those are all going to go as far as the TNT did. Now in some cases, especially in the case of TNT, it's usually wise to add a wall on the back of this slime block here, and if you want to make sure TNT aligns with a specific block like this when it is primed, then you usually want to use walls or something like that around this slime block, because they'll attach the slime block, they'll get pulled along with the slime block when it moves, but the walls have a 1.5 block high hitbox, which is kind of invisible when you're just looking at the block, but it's what prevents animals and players from being able to jump over them. And in this case, it'll make sure that the TNT doesn't move backwards too far when it's primed and get stuck under the slime block underneath. So this pretty much guarantees that your TNT will be flung in the same direction each time. And a little bit further away from our testing area over there, for my own safety more than anything else, we're going to set up a note block down here with an observer facing downwards into it like so, some sort of solid block on top of that here, and have that power a dispenser, which is going to feed TNT onto the slime block here with a wall behind it to make sure that the TNT doesn't slip backwards at all. And now we can whack the note block a couple of times, launch the TNT whenever we want to, and we end up with multiple explosions happening over there. So if I right-click this a couple of times, we prime a ton of TNT, fling it all in that direction, and the resulting explosion can be very satisfying. Just don't let the TNT cook for too long, otherwise you might end up cooking your slime block launcher instead. But there's 2 more left in here, so why not throw those in there as well? Now, another key feature of slime blocks is their ability to push and pull blocks along with them. We're used to sticky pistons being able to push blocks and the blocks staying attached to the sticky piston's head, and a slime block basically provides that, but on all 6 faces of the block. I guess 5 potentially, because in theory one of those faces of the block has to be connected to a piston, but it can, in theory, pull a piston along with it as long as the piston is flat like this. If the piston is extended, then it can't be pulled or pushed, and therefore it's not really possible to do that. But let's say we attach a bunch of andesite blocks around the other 5 faces of this slime block. We can activate this piston here, and that will push all of the andesite blocks along with it. Basically, everything that's attached to the slime block moves when the slime block is pushed using a piston. And this is where it's really important to know what blocks can be pushed or pulled by a sticky piston, because not all blocks that can be pushed can be pulled, and vice versa. Obviously, there are blocks like obsidian, which we know can't be pushed by pistons at all, and it also can't be pulled by pistons or slime blocks, which might seem pretty obvious, right? But then there are some other blocks which can be pushed but cannot be pulled. Melons are an interesting example of this. Melons cannot be pulled by pistons, and therefore they cannot be pulled around by slime blocks either. If we silk touch this, we'll get the full melon block back, and I'll demonstrate that if we attach those to the sides of a slime block like so, when we press the button to activate the piston extends and retracts with the slime block attached to it, and the melons stay where they are. The crafting table down there has been pulled back by the slime block, but the melons stayed where they were. Now, if you end up pushing a melon either with a piston or with a slime block attached to a piston, they break, and in the case of the slime block, block, they actually get flung away quite dramatically. Another example of a block like this that behaves a bit more conventionally is Glazed Terracotta. Glazed Terracotta can be pushed but cannot be pulled, and therefore you can use Glazed Terracotta to isolate slime blocks from other parts of redstone circuits because the Glazed Terracotta will not be pulled around by the slime blocks. It's worth noting that you can also attach several slime blocks together all in one pad like this, and the whole pad will be pushed around if the slime blocks connect to each other. Although if you throw a non-pushable block in front of it like this obsidian, and then we press the button, the slime blocks aren't going to go anywhere, because it is more important to them that they stay connected instead of trying to be pushed around this obsidian block and leaving the one slime block that can't be pushed past it behind. Slime blocks also obey the maximum piston push limit, which is 12 blocks. Once you go more than 12 blocks attached to the head of a piston, it will not be able to push them any further. So if we take a look at this, we've got 6 slime blocks there, 6 polished andesite blocks on the front. That can currently be pushed. If we add another slime block right here, can't be pushed at all. And if we added another andesite block to the front of this, once again, this whole section cannot be pushed. If we remove that one more time, there you go. All 12 of the blocks can be pushed in unison. Despite that, however, there are some pretty clever ways of getting around the whole 12 block push rule, and that's usually by chaining a series of slime blocks pushing other components along with them. Let's say, for example, we expand this pad of slime blocks so there are 10 blocks all being pushed by one piston. We can only add 2 more blocks, so what we're going to add is an observer facing this way and a sticky piston attached to it. Attached to the sticky piston, we're going to add another pad of 10 slime blocks, all arranged like so. We're going to make sure that these don't connect to this observer, for the reason that the observer would be pulled around by them if this sticky piston activates. If we activate this observer using anything, a torch in this case, it's going to activate the piston next to it and push that whole bunch of slime blocks along with it. But then if this piston back here gets activated, then it can push the entire contraption forward. The observer fires that sticky piston, which detaches the pad of slime blocks from the front of it, and the whole contraption is moved over by a block. It's also worth noting here that slime blocks and honey blocks will not stick to each other, but they have pretty similar properties. Honey blocks will move blocks around that are stuck on them the way that slime blocks do, but if we place all of these side by side like so, we have 2 sets of blocks that can operate independently of each other. If I activate this sticky piston here using a button on top of a block, then that whole thing is going to move, and obviously it's moved the block that I activated it with along with it. But if we set this up with blocks that the slime blocks won't get attached to, we can see that these slime blocks can activate completely independently of the honey blocks, but the honey blocks won't pull these blocks back either. But one of my favorite things about slime blocks is the fact that we can use them to create redstone-powered flying machines. By placing 2 rows of slime blocks offset from each other with pistons facing into each one and observers facing towards the pistons this way and this way. Alternatively, you can have the observers facing upwards because they'll channel the redstone current into the slime blocks, which will activate the pistons adjacent to them. We can now use a non-pushable block to activate this flying machine, and there it goes. It starts propelling itself through the air of its own volition. Each time the observer detects that it's moved along a block, it will activate the piston, and the pistons are effectively pulling and pushing the slime blocks across the world with them. Machines like this will keep going until they reach something that they cannot pass, an obstacle that they cannot pass, like, for example, a block of obsidian, which I kind of had to spam against the back of that because it's kind of difficult to place blocks against components which are moving. And in this case, it's actually swiped a log directly out of that birch tree, which is pretty cool of it. But if we hadn't stopped it with obsidian here, the slime block flying machine would have run on until it encountered enough blocks, picked up enough blocks with it, like the trees that it's just managing to collect chunks of, that it would stop entirely because the pistons would reach their push limit, or if it was unobstructed, it would just keep going until it hit the edge of the loaded area, at which point, if the player wasn't following along with it, it would just go out of the render distance, out of the simulation distance, and stop. But if you want to, the player can even ride flying machines like this. I've cut away a few of the leaves here to prepare for the fact that we're going to be coming on through here. We're going to put some sort of solid block behind us, and then we can use a non-pushable block to activate this piston, and we are headed back in the direction that we came, supported by the block behind us. And we brought that chunk of the tree with us again, but these flying machines can be used for a whole variety of things, and it's a design that we're going to revisit over and over again in the rest of the survival guide when we get onto automated farms, collection mechanisms, and all kinds of fun stuff. As forms of transportation go, they are pretty slow, but in terms of technical stuff you can do with the game, this is only the beginning. And what a beginning it is. Folks, that is where we're going to leave it for this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. Rest assured we have not seen the last of slime blocks. We're going to be doing a lot of cool stuff with them in the near future, so hopefully you folks will be on board for that. Don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more, and I'll see you folks soon. Take care. Bye for now.